Hello, my friends. The time has finally come. Chaos Dwarves are out, and that means it's time for us to talk about how they play in Domination. The way we usually go over these videos is we're going to take a look at the roster, talk about each unit, what it provides, what it's good for, and then we're going to talk about the general playstyle of the faction and look at some template builds that we might use in a Domination game. So, starting with the Lords, from left to right we have the Overseer. He's just a generic melee lord. He has the Taurus and Lamasu mounts, and he's kind of underwhelming. He doesn't have any unique abilities aside from Black Gem of Nar, which just makes him invulnerable for a few seconds, but he loses all melee attack. And as far as melee characters go, he's okay, but he's largely overshadowed. We have Zatin the Black. He has some unique abilities. He has the net, which is very, very nice. Nets are always very good, and this one has an exceptionally long duration at 33 seconds. But you really need to find the right build for him to synergize with. Nets really synergize with shooting, so if you have a lot of guns and you want to just net them down and shoot it, he can go very well with that. But he's not a caster, and he's quite expensive, so unless you have a specific job for him, he doesn't really have much of a place. His abilities are, some of them are okay. Leadership debuff is alright. Just melee attack stat. This one doesn't really work because he's not a caster. He's a single entity character lord, which means he's a hard time actually racking up the kills to get what is a pretty impressive buff if he can get there, but most times he won't be able to get there in a reasonable amount of time, so it's just not that useful. Chaos Rune Shield is a bit of an odd one. It just gives him immune contact effects and an aura, which is a bit weird. There's not a whole lot of matchups where you know you're going to have heavily debilitating contact effects. The only one I can really think of is like Nurgle, where they all have poison, so this could be okay to just remove the poison, but it's not super essential. And then damage resist is nice. He gets tankier as he gets lower. That's fine. He's a strong duelist, but doesn't provide a whole lot for the army aside from the net. Sorcerer Prophets have become a very popular pick because they have all the flying mounts. They have several different lords of magic, which are all pretty appealing. Death, Fire, Hashut, and Metal are all pretty good. Hashut probably being the weakest out of them. A lot of the spells aren't that good, but we'll talk about that in another video. But Fire, Metal, and Death are all very solid lores. Combine that with the Flying Mount and the Vial of Hashut, which gives 60% fire weakness for 55 seconds, and a pistol that also imbues fire weakness, and it also does fine damage on its own. This guy is just a really good generalist lord. He's a little on the pricey side. With a typical spell kit, you're going to be running like, I don't know, 2k if he's on the cheaper mount, almost 3k if he's on the more expensive mount. But he's a really solid lord. Having the flying lord is really nice to go and just fly around and spot things for your cannons to shoot. Again, having a flying caster is always very, very nice. Get the spells where you need them, having the flying terror source. So it's a very nice generalist character, and then Vial of Hashut does have some nice combo potential with either Lore of Fire spells, like Flaming Sword or Burning Head, or just all the fire damage you do have on the roster anyway. So it's a very, very nice combo piece. Moving on to Drazhoath the Ashen. He does suffer a bit from being a Hashut caster. As I said, it's one of the weaker lores. The only good spells being Hell's Hammer, which is a fine damage spell, and Flames of Asgorth, which again is a fine damage spell, but it's nothing special. He has a single mount option at Cinder Breath, which is the Bale Taurus. Again, it's fine. Lore passive is bad. This ability is actually kind of nice. Plus 8 melee attack to all units that have Contempt, which is going to be all your Chaos Dwarf units, all your Bull Centaur units. Not bad. It can actually give your infantry a pretty decent melee attack stat line, but it's not bad. It's not great, not bad. Again, just melee attack boosting buff, melee damage is fine. Spell mastery, increasing with kills made, is a bit of an odd one because he is a caster, so that he can stack this ability, but he stacks it by casting spells, and his spells are expensive. So by the time you stack this, you're not going to have a WOM left to use the spell intensity. So it's kind of redundant. And then Hellshot Amulet is fine if you're going to be fighting with him a lot, but not essential. So he's an okay lord, but the big boys is Astrogoth Ironhand. This guy is well statted, very, very fast, a foot character with exceptional mass at 5,000, a ton of hit points, and a pretty competitive spell list. Mostly the one you take is Flamestorm or Hellhammer. Again, just big chaff clearing spells. And his items are pretty good as well. As he gets lower, he gets a little bit slower because he has a lot of Fizz resist. And then Black Hammer of Hashut, again, just a melee damage steroid, which does very, very good damage. Mechanical Overdrive you don't usually see a whole lot because it's just not a hugely impactful buff, and it takes a while to stack up, and the lore passives are whatever. So yeah, the most competitive lords you'll see are Astrogoth Iron Hand, or that Sorcerer Prophet on a flying mount. As for heroes, we have Gorda's Backstabber, and he's actually pretty nice. He's really cheap. You usually just take him completely stripped down. His abilities aren't that overwhelming. This heal is a pretty mediocre heal. It takes forever. It doesn't heal a whole lot, especially since he has a very small health pool in general. His dice have a very, very long downtime. They can give you a nice, like 40% ward save. It's really, really nice if you roll it. But even if you do get lucky and roll it, it's only up for 30 seconds, and then it has over 2 minutes of downtime. Because it has a 30-second duration on the buff. It says that its duration is 90 seconds, but it actually only goes up for the 30 seconds of whatever effect you rolled. So it has an extra 6 seconds duration where it's doing nothing, and then 90 seconds of cooldown. So it's 2.5 minutes before you can activate it again. So it just has a massive amount of downtime, and it might not even roll well for you, so it's not a very impressive ability in my opinion. So usually you want to keep him stripped down, in which case he's exceptionally cheap. You can also throw him on a mount. He's really nice for going after enemy casters and gooning them out, and actually has a really nice stat line for the price. He's still just a really, really good duelist. So just having him grinding in the front line is fine, or like I said, throw him on a wolf, let him hunt down enemy caster, or even enemy lord if they're particularly squishy, so he's not a bad option. Infernal Castellan is not a bad guy either. He has a very nice missile attack at range, has a halberd in melee, but really what you want this guy for is the range shooting power. His missile attack is very, very good, especially when you're shooting elite targets like cavalry or chariots or characters. He can do quite well. His abilities, again, aren't that interesting. Healing in melee, well, you don't really want him in melee. Melee attack buff that can be applied to allied units is alright. And then the entrenchment mechanic is a bit wonky because you have to sit still for 25 seconds to actually use it, and usually games are going to be a little more dynamic than that. You're not going to be sitting still that long. But overall, if you just take him naked or with a melee attack buff for allies, 850 for a character that just sits and shoots, does pretty good damage. He's not bad all around. The Bull Center Torok. This guy is a big single entity duelist with a hefty bonus versus large. And he hits pretty hard. He has Guardian, he has Foe Seeker, Heroic Killing Blow. So if you need an SEM duelist, he's not bad. He's got a couple of interesting items. This one, Talisman of Obsidian, the Lamasu has this effect as well, where it negates magical weapons within the effect area. But there's very little physical resistance on this roster to actually make up for it. I guess he has Guardian, but negating magical weapons is most useful when you have physical resist, because magical attacks will negate physical resist. So you really want to pair those two things, but they just don't have a whole lot of phys resist on the roster to pair it with, so it's kind of underwhelming. The Dark Mace is actually a nice ability. Minus 30 armor is whatever, but 35 meter aura and increasing vigor, actually just reducing your opponent's vigor so they tire more quickly, is actually pretty valuable, because, you know, it, being low on vigor reduces a lot of combat stats, melee attack, speed, I think weapon strength as well, so it's actually pretty impactful. The big thing that this guy suffers with is that with the Dark Mace, he's 1350, and you know he's a nice, like I said, he's a nice Bull Centaur single entity character. But for 100 gold more, you could just take a regular Bull Centaur, which is probably better in most cases. So he's a nice duelist, but he's usually overshadowed. Demon Smith Sorcerer. If you aren't taking Caster Lord, these guys are actually really nice. The actually really nice thing about these guys is if you strip them down, take nothing on them, and throw them on Great Taurus or Lamasu or Bale Taurus, they cost the same as the monsters do themselves. So this guy on a Bale Taurus costs 1800, a regular Bale Taurus is 1800, put him on Great Taurus, 1200, Great Taurus is 1200. So for the same price, you get some extra leadership, some extra armor, and you get the pistol attack. So there's not really a reason to take these guys naked. Just throw this guy on him, take him as a monster, pretty nice monster. And you know, if you need a caster, he's also a caster, so these guys are pretty nice. They have the Reforge as well, which is really nice if you're taking out the Hellforge units, which are your trains or your Kadai units, which gives a pretty nice heal to them, kind of like the Restore for the Necrotex. It's just a solid heal all around, nothing to write home about. And those other abilities are pretty underwhelming. So, but yeah, if you just need a monster, he's a straight upgrade. So take him if you want a monster. And that brings us to infantry. Goblin laborers are exceptional. They are very, very cheap. They don't do much damage, but that's not their job. They get in the way, they absorb hits, they lower your opponent's vigor, kind of like Bretonnian peasants or Skaven slaves. They fulfill that job just being ultra cheap chaff. They get in the way, that's their job. They're expected to die. They're fine. Orc laborers are not so much. They're twice the price, and really all they get is a little extra health, and armor piercing is the big thing. Armor piercing isn't super relevant if you're not hitting anything because your melee attack is garbage. So for twice the price, all you're getting is a meat shield with a little more hit points and actually less melee defense, so they're going to die even faster. Not a very attractive meat shield in my opinion. Hobgoblin Cutthroats and Hobgoblin Sneaky Idiots are both pretty overpriced. Their melee stats are really, really low for the price. These guys, 28, 20, 28 with 7 bonus for infantry is just so bad for 575. Like, if you compare that to, like, the same price you can get Khorne Dual Axe Marauders, which aren't even considered a great unit, but they have way better stats, much better weapon strength. Like, they're just really underwhelming. They have the missile attack. It's nothing to write home about. It's not that good. The Backstabber effect gets a little extra weapon damage. I have not been impressed with these guys. I don't take them very often. Dwarf Warriors. Chaos Dwarf Warriors and Grey Open. They're just an all-around solid defensive unit. Well, Shield is defensive. Grey Open is offensive. They're solid. Not a whole lot there. They're just a frontline backbone unit. They're good. The Arwar has the AP blasting charge as well as fire attacks and frenzy. Good unit. The AP blasting charges delete infantry, especially clustered tight formation infantry. Again, really solid unit. Infernal Guard Grey Opens. Kind of like Marauder Champions in that they're just exceptionally defensive, really, really tanky, good hit points, silver shields, armor, high melee defense. They will grind and grind and grind and grind, and a lot of factions really struggle to kill units with this high melee defense. And especially with a lot of the infantry punishing spells being nerfed, Pit of Shades, Dwellers Below, that kind of thing. With those things being nerfed, these guys have become a real nuisance for a lot of factions to remove from the battlefield. So if you need a tanky frontline, look no further. These guys are very difficult to remove for, honestly, a pretty reasonable price. And then, Grey Open variant, 150 for AP is quite a price to pay, especially when you're losing that much MD. But if you really need the AP, sure, go for it. Infernal Ironsworn, the elite of the elite. Exceptional melee stats. AP blasting charges, 2 volleys. That's enough to kill off almost 2 heavily armored infantry units. You can kill elite units with those blasting charges if you get them in the right spot. And then they're just an exceptionally tanky unit. 10k HP, 125 armor, silver shields. Again, the whole 9 yards. There's a really solid infantry unit. Again, if you can avoid those Pits of Shades, the only 3 that they get now, and keep these guys alive, they're going to just fight and fight and fight and fight and be such a nuisance for your opponent to remove. They're just such a sticky infantry and hard to remove. If you need tanks, they're the tankiest boys you can get. The Immortals. I have mixed feelings on the Immortals. The big thing with these guys is that they lose the blasting charges, and the blasting charges are so good. Just that ranged weapon attack, that explosive damage is incredible. They'll delete most infantry units, and these guys are more expensive and don't have them. Now, they're your one and only real aggressive infantry unit, and they're a pretty good aggressive infantry unit. 14 bonus with infantry, they chew through their infantry, but just a one-off offensive infantry unit in a very defensive lineup doesn't really accomplish much. They'll make one hole in the enemy line, but usually if you're going for aggressive infantry, you want to just run over their line, and these guys, like I said, they do it in one spot, but you'd love to do that in multiple spots, and you can't. So it's kind of odd just to have the one offensive infantry unit. They do their job really well. It just is kind of a black sheep in this infantry roster. On to missiles. Hobgoblin archers have pretty reliable damage output if they're allowed to stay and shoot, which is the problem they tend to have. You tend to have pretty expensive infantry, which is all on the expensive side, which means you can't go wide enough to protect these guys most of the time. So usually if you're going to protect a missile unit, well, it's a pretty big commitment to protect it, so you want something more valuable that's going to get more of your damage right up front, which is where these guys come in. Actually, both of these guys. Blunderbusses and Fireglaves both hit incredibly hard. Blunderbusses more so. They are short range. They are fairly tanky in melee, but they just shred anything they shoot. 49 missile strength, 80 models. They hit hard. So if you can protect these guys and get them in range, they will pay for themselves many times over. But they are very short range, so they do have a bit of trouble actually getting there and continuously firing. Fireglaves. Little less damage output, little more range, and they're anti-large in melee and have charge defense. So they are a semi-elite halberd unit with a solid missile attack at range. So they are a much safer option as far as shooting goes. Though they're a less risky, less reward. So if that's your style, go for them. The Granite Guard is quite a considerable upgrade over the base variant. Just massive stat increases across the board. They get that dug-in ability that the Castellan has. Again, I don't think you're going to get much use out of this. You have to sit still for 25 seconds before it starts applying. And Domination is such a dynamic game mode that even if you turn slightly to get a better line of fire, you're going to lose that ability, and it's just not going to be active very often. But the extra melee stats and HP off of these guys is still exceptional. So they are still quite a considerable upgrade for 300 gold. On to Cavalry. Hobgoblin Wolf Riders. Raiders, sorry. Very unique unit, nothing at all like Goblin Wolf Riders. Good charge bonus, passable melee stats. For 550, they're a little pricey, but they're your only cheap mobility option, so sometimes you need them. Cowardly Spoilers is an okay ability if you're flanking, but honestly, these guys often are a reactionary summon. You need to just bring them to be a sweeper unit, get something out of your backline. So they're a necessary evil. I find myself taking them quite a bit, but I don't love them for the price. So they fill a hole in your roster in cheap mobility, but they're not great in a vacuum of cheap mobility. On to the big busted unit, Bull Centaur Renders. All of these variants are exceptional. This unit is incredibly overpowered. They are a monstrous cavalry, I want to say, unit. They're just so good. They beat almost everything. They have excellent melee stats, lots and lots of HP, missile resist, fire resist, decent armor. Great weapons kill big things, dual weapons kill little things. Shields are kind of irrelevant because they tend to not get hit by missiles a whole lot anyway. Their hitboxes are a little buggy and they're not that big, so they tend to not get hit by missiles that much. The RWR is exceptional. Missile attack that does a lot of damage. Revel in Fear, which is a massive melee buff when there's wavering enemies nearby. Guardian, Fizz Resist. If you're not taking some of these guys in your build, you have messed up. They are the best unit on the roster by far. Well, not by far. There's nothing that competes. We'll get to that shortly, but these guys are incredible. I cannot overstate this enough. These guys are defining the meta in Domination at the moment. So yeah, very balanced unit. Missile Cavalry, Skirmish Cav. Hobgoblin Wolf Raider bows aren't bad. They're a solid Skirmish Cav. I feel like I don't have a whole lot to say. They skirmish good. They have fire damage. Yeah. ROR is kind of pricey, but it has fire weakness on its melee attack, or missile attack, excuse me. And you have a lot of fire damage in your roster, so it does synergize a lot of things. Though I believe this one is the same effect as the pistol attack on the Sorcerer Prophet, as well as the Demon Smith, so those don't stack with themselves. So it does have a little bit of middling use. And then its unique ability is, I feel like it's going to be more useful in land battles where you actually have to chase things off the map. Lowering speed on routing units isn't that relevant when you're not chasing them, which you don't do a whole lot in Domination. So Monsters and Beast. So like I said, for the 3 flyers, if you're going to take them, just take a Demon Smith with nothing on the mount. But if you want them, Great Taurus, cheapest Pterosaurus you have, I believe. Good damage, solid melee combatant, a little squishy at low melee defense and low missile resist. So it is vulnerable to getting shots, so you need to be a little careful with that. But other than that, it's kind of like an AP Manticore. So melee reflection and fizz resist is alright. So not a whole lot to say. Flying Singularity, causes tear, hits hard, solid all around. Lamasu is a bit of a weird one. Its offensive stats aren't as good as the Great Taurus. It loses that AP, and it gets Enfeebling Foe, which is not a great spell. The Withering, again, not a great spell. And then it gets that Sorcerous Miasma I was talking about earlier, where it negates magical weapons. But it doesn't have physical resist itself. And not a whole lot of other things do have physical resist. I guess some of your other monsters do. But it's just a weird ability to have on the Chaos Dwarf roster. If this ability was on like Demons of Chaos, where like their entire roster is physical resist, it'd be incredible. But unless you have something specific you're trying to protect, something specific with Fizz resist you're trying to protect, maybe Astrogoth, sure. Otherwise, I'd just take a Bell Taurus most of the time, or a Great Taurus most of the time. So I haven't really found a whole lot of reason to bring the Lamasu yet. We'll talk about the Great Bell Taurus, and then we'll talk about the Kadai units. Bell Taurus is the Great Taurus' big brother. It's just an upgrade. Better in melee, has a breath attack. Its breath attack is different than dragon breath attacks in that it's more focused, doesn't spread out as much, so it doesn't kill groups as well. So it's a little less powerful than dragon breath attacks, but it's still solid. And then it has the Blazing Body effect, which actually the same one as the other one has. But yeah, it's just a stat upgrade. Breath attacks and stat upgrade over the Great Taurus. So if the Great Taurus isn't getting the job done, maybe bring in one of these guys. Not a whole lot to say there. Kadai Fireborn and Kadai Destroyer. So Kadai Fireborn are anti-infantry, monsters infantry, and then the Kadai Destroyer is the big, ultimate SEM for the Chaos Dwarfs. They both suffer from the same problem of they are demon units, so they crumble and they disintegrate, but they have pretty low leadership for such expensive units. And they have this ability, where is it? Burning Bright, where they're above 50% HP, they're unbreakable. But they're not going to break above 50% HP anyway. So like you need Unbreakable when you're low health, when you've taken a lot of damage, and you're just trying to hang in the fight. Unbreakable is not useful when you're fresh. So it's just when they get low, they crumble pretty easily. And for such expensive units, that feels really, really bad. So I usually just skip out on these guys. Like, I guess if you really need a big SEM, I can't think of why you wouldn't Domination. But if you really, really want it, sure, it's pretty pricey. And like I said, it just crumbles away too soon. So I feel like I'm rolling the dice when I bring these guys. Especially for these guys, since you have Bull Centaur dual axes that serve a lot of the same role, but they're faster, they're tankier, they're just all around better at that job. There's literally never a reason to bring the Kadai over the Bull Centaurs. And the big guy, yeah, he's really pricey, and he just disintegrates too easily. Alright, on to artillery and trains. Magma Cannon. So you know how I said that there was one unit that competes with the Bull Centaur Renders for being the most broken unit on this roster? We've gotten there. Yeah, it's a cannon. It's a single empty cannon. It fires at pretty good range, and it excels against large amounts of models. So infantry, grouped infantry. It has a good explosion damage, and then it also leaves behind a vortex where it hits. So it's just a lingering fire effect that if enemies walk into it, they'll take a staggering amount of damage. They are incredible. Like I said, they're the other unit that is defining this roster at the moment. They're incredibly strong. If you're playing any kind of defensive build with dwarfs, it's gonna be centered around these guys, usually. They actually have unit customization as well. They have this Hellbound ability for magical attacks, physical resist, and perfect vigor, enabled if they're more than 25% HP. This ability is completely useless. You always take it off because it's bugged, and you'll get it either way. So always take them for 900 if you can. Yeah, not a whole lot to say. I can't overstate the strength of these guys. They are incredibly strong, very, very impressive against a lot of factions. They clear infantry so fast. They're already against cavalry, but infantry is what they really excel at. They're exceptional. Iron Demon. This is a shotgun train. It is a melee chariot in melee, but it has this shotgun attack that is really underwhelming. I'm not sure if it just doesn't hit or if its damage is just garbage, but it never seems to kill anything at range. As for a melee train, you have a dedicated melee train, so there's not a whole lot of reason to bring it for that purpose. And the shotgun attack is pretty underwhelming. Help Cannon, same as the one on the Walk roster, Warriors of Chaos roster. It is the unit that every time I take it, it feels like it never hits, and every time somebody uses it against me, it feels like it never misses. When it hits, it's incredible. That never happens for me, so I don't take it. It's lied to me one too many times, so I'm not taking this piece of garbage anymore. It keeps lying to me. Skullcracker. This is your melee train. It's melee chariot, which actually does surprisingly good damage, but it is fairly micro-intensive being a single entity chariot unit. So if you want to take the time and micro it and just run over infantry all day, it's not that bad at that job. But it does take a lot of micro, and that's assuming there's no large units to get in your way, which it will be very sad about if there are large units. The Death Shrieker rocket launcher. This one is kind of like the bolt throwers for high elves and dark elves, where it has two modes. It has the anti-infantry mode and the anti-large mode. The anti-infantry mode is hot garbage. Don't use it. The anti-large mode is actually surprisingly okay. It's very accurate and it hits pretty hard, but it doesn't do well against multi-entity models, so anything other than a single entity or a chariot, it's not going to do a whole lot against. I mean, it'll usually one-shot models on monsters infantry or monsters cavalry, but it doesn't fire very fast, so it's going to take a very, very long time to actually do meaningful damage to those types of units. So if you have a single entity that you're trying to get rid of, or chariots like war wagons you're trying to get rid of, it's pretty good, those jobs. Outside of those jobs, specific jobs, I wouldn't take it. Soul of Damnation, RR Hell Cannon. If you won't be disappointed with even more ammo, be my guest. Demon's Tongue, the RR Iron Demon. This guy's pretty good. Instead of a shotgun, it has a flamethrower, kind of like the Gallows Giant for the Vampire Coast. It's a little micro-intensive, as it is very short range and wants to get side shots on infantry units, but it does excellent damage if you can get those shots. If you spend all of its ammo shooting infantry, you'll pay for itself and then some, but it does take a lot of micromanaging to actually get those shots. So, if you're interested in putting in that investment, go for it. Alright, the big boy, the Dreadquake Mortar. This guy is really good, again, when it hits. It's not super accurate, and unlike the stats here, which says it's 60 speed, it's actually only 20 speed, just like the Magma Cannon. The stats are lying to you. So it can't actually get in range to get those good, those short range accurate shots very often on its own. So it's a very high risk, high reward unit. If it hits, it'll do incredible damage. If it doesn't, you spend 2,300 on a big fancy piece of crap. Now, what you can do with this guy is actually mount it on the back of the Iron Demon, the Dreadquake, or the Skullcracker. Again, with a Dreadquake. Or I think you can do it on the Demon's Tongue as well. Yeah, so you can mount it on the back of these guys and actually give it some speed. And that's when it will have 60 speed. And then it also has the other train on the front, which actually, oh wow, it's the same price with the ROR as it is with the basic ones. So I guess you'd take up the ROR if you're doing it. The problem with these things, while they are more mobile, you no longer can target the missile attack on the back. You'll still have the missile attack on the front, in this case the flamethrower or the shotgun, and if you right click on an opponent, then that's the one you're targeting. The Dreadquake on the back will still fire at whatever target it pleases, which, you know, can be incredibly random and incredibly frustrating at times. So it's an incredibly expensive piece. If you can keep it alive, sure, it has very, very high potential, but it's a very high risk, high reward type of unit, so be cautioned. I would typically stick to the much more reliable Magma Cannons. Which does bring me to general playstyles for Chaos Dwarves. The Chaos Dwarves, if you haven't figured it out by now, are a pretty elite faction. Their lower tier stuff isn't that great. You're often relying on your very expensive units to be the backbone of your army. So, as far as styles go, I have a couple of template builds that we can look at to talk about how they actually play. Where are Chaos Dwarves? So we have a more aggressive style build if you do want to go for that more offensive rush style build and just spam the really broken Bull Centaur unit. This is a pretty good style to do it. Just have some chaff. You have your Bull Centaurs. Astrogoth is a really nice lord for this, as he's fast, he is tanky, and he hits hard. And then you usually bring with like Flamestorm or Hellhammer, you know, his items, whatever. You have this guy on a monster would come in with a Pterosaurus, fly around, kill things, route things. This is just a fast, aggressive build. If there's some single entity that needs shot or something big and exposed, these guys can come in and bring some firepower. Just a nice, fast, aggressive roster build for Chaos Dwarves in Domination. The other option is to play the more typical defensive, more akin to the regular Dwarves, where you just have your cannons, you have your elite infantry protecting it, you have your Lord in the sky flying around on a Great Taurus. He can go out and scout enemy units. If they're stalked, you can reveal them and target them for your Magma Cannons. And then you have your Bull Centaurs come in and be your sweeper units to protect your backline, protect your magma cannons from anything that's going to threaten them. So you have your bull centaurs coming to kill big things, anything that's threatening you, your magma cannons kill your infantry, and your front line holds for days and days. And it's a very solid recipe for Chaos Dwarfs. It's one you'll see quite a lot in the coming weeks and months in tournaments, I suspect. So that is the basics of Chaos Dwarfs in Domination. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys next time.